Hello, and welcome to the Tarot for May 1st, 2024. There were just a lot of questions that came up this month, especially around the fighting between Israel, Iran, and the possibility of World War III. So that became my first question. And then I found myself really super aware of the growing anger about what's happening at the southern border of the US. And the possibility of that anger spilling over and making it difficult to travel safely because of wandering gangs or street riots. So that became my second question. The third question came out of the concern for the medical treaty that the US is preparing to sign with the World Health Organization. So that was my third question. And then the fourth was, after such heavy questions, I thought, okay, is there, do we need to build a new world? Can I get a message from Mother Nature about the need or the wisdom or whatever about building a new world? So I went to look in Animal Speak, which is this wonderful book, opened right to one of the birds. So let's begin. The questions actually were, number one, what do we need to know and prepare for regarding the Israeli-Iran clash in the Middle East and its outcome? Number two, given the situation at the southern border of the US and the infiltration of tens of thousands of illegal immigrants, will this affect our ability to travel safely and to move about freely in our cities and towns? Number three, what do we need to know and do about the World Health Organization and the medical sovereignty that the US government is planning to hand over to them on May 8th, 2024? It's just another week or so. And the last one, number four, what can Mother Nature and the animal kingdom tell us about building a new world? And the cards drawn were, for question number one, I actually ended up pulling two cards without realizing it. The Ace of Swords and the Seven of Swords. Question number two, I drew number 8, the Hermit from the Major Arcana. Very unusual card. For question number 3, I got the 10 of Swords. And for the last question, which I got from, as I said, Animal Speak, I turned right to and open to the Goldfinch. So let's begin. Question number 1, what should we know about the Israeli-Iran clash in the Middle East and its outcome? So I prepared myself for several days before sitting down to ask questions and draw cards. So I was really very intensely focused once I started. And I was really quite surprised to see that I had pulled 2 cards in answer to the first question. Sometimes you realize you're pulling 2 cards and you can kind of, fiddle around till you've only got one, but I didn't realize it until I had actually pulled them both. So the cards were the Ace of Swords and the 7 of Swords. A lot of swords lately. And each one carries a pretty blunt message for us. So swords represent the weapons of life, but the message they carry is one that asks us to use our head to avoid violent conflict. Only in this way can we make life easier to live instead of more difficult for ourselves. Swords tell us that the intellect, the mental realm, is where all war and fighting begins. And that's where it could end if we knew how to maintain a clear picture of what is needed and what is unfolding. When you look at this card, when you look at the ace, you see a blue and white sword held by a hand coming out of some rather dark clouds. And the blue edge of the sword represents feeling and calls for clarity in a situation, something that's really often absent in the heat of war. The white edge of the sword symbolizes rigid thinking, inflexible demands, naivete, and sometimes even ruthlessness. The task of those facing or caught in fighting is to gain enough clarity to understand the root of the problem so it can be resolved to the satisfaction of both sides. How much do we really know and understand about the Israeli or Iranian mindset? Why did Israel suddenly decide to bomb the Iranian embassy in Syria, killing 13 people? Kind of out of the blue, or that's how it looks. But I'm sure there's more to it than that. What outcome does each side want? Has any news reporter talked about this? About what they each want? So maybe we could sit down at the table and talk? If the fighting is not about borders, is it about resources? Is it about gold? Some imagined insult? A greed for power? Or something else, something hidden? Whatever it is, it must be brought to the surface, examined, and understood. And that's what swords are all about, the sword of the intellect. At the tip of the sword, we see a four-pointed crown with two different types of green branches hanging from it. And those green branches represent consciousness and its magnificent power, which can be used for peace, wisdom, and a celebration of life, or alienation, judgment, and destruction. The greenery also represents nature and our natural selves. It symbolizes our immersion in nature and the fact that we are part of the natural world. And the fact that our form of intellect has taken us to the top of the food chain, but can also be used to destroy us. There are 6 golden droplets around the sword and a background of gray skies. The gray skies point to a problem of uncaring or low-level unconscious behavior, while the golden droplets work together with the golden crown to symbolize the power of awakened consciousness. The droplets are a reminder that we can create a paradise with our consciousness, or we can lose it all through suffering and war. And the crown backs this up by reminding us that we are the crowning glory of creation. The hand emerging from the very dark gray clouds backs up these reminders and tells us that reality is in our hands. And we must handle reality with an enlightened mind, lest we create a hell for ourselves. The bright aura of light around that hand is a counterpoint to the dark gray clouds the hand emerges from. So the question becomes, are we holding an attitude of destruction and fear? Or have we awakened to the truth that we are a gift to ourselves and a gift to the world? And there's no need for violence and war. The mountains at the bottom of the card are blue and violet. And these symbolize the conflict between positive and negative mental attitudes. So somebody over there has some really negative mental attitudes. At this moment, We are just observers and not directly involved in the fighting. But can we remain as observers? Are we going to get drawn in? The mountains represent big problems and a need to clarify what we want in life. They ask us to decide whether theory and a facade of power and righteousness is more important than practical well-being and the willingness to deal fairly and wisely with what the situation requires. The second card that came out with the Ace of Swords was the Seven of Swords. And this card has a very definite message. It's a card symbolizing contradiction, betrayal, and theft. It's often seen as signaling an unstable effort that cannot be sustained or followed through with. And it often results in a need to return whatever was stolen or whatever the contradiction is, recant the contradictions and the declarations that turn out to be silly or overblown. It's also a card of hidden doubts and self-sabotage. Somebody over there is sabotaging themselves. On this card, we see a figure carrying 5 swords by their blades instead of by their handles. This represents an action that will cut the hands of the perpetrator or thief in ways that will make it impossible for him to continue his actions. Can I say that again? It's going to cut the hands of whoever started this. And I think that was Israel. It appears that way. So it indicates that the fight begun by Israel is not sustainable. The 2 swords standing behind the figure indicate mental doubts about what they're doing. But the posture of the figure says that they feel compelled to try to get away with the swords in hand. Maybe they can get away with it. That's the thinking. Since Israel was the one who started the fighting by attacking Iran's embassy in Syria, it may find it has started something it cannot finish. Oddly, the figure is running forward on tiptoe, but is looking backwards. And this often points to a disastrous fall because of the failure to look ahead, a failure to watch where you're going or to correctly anticipate one's future. Again, this is the sign of doubts and inner conflict. And that's backed up by the fact that the figure is on his tiptoes. One cannot tiptoe in war. And doing so is a contradiction in itself. It points to timidity and self-sabotage. So the red hat and the red boots point to something that may have been impulsive and not well thought out, but was instead driven by illusions of power or maybe unrealistic expectations. There are several really extremely tiny figures in the background of the card. And the fact that they're so tiny as to be almost unnoticed symbolizes an attitude of disdain, looking down the nose at people, and behavior that says, yeah, they're not important. Watch out there. There are several tents in the background, and tents always indicate that homelessness is involved here. So this could mean that the leaders or the people of Israel feel like they have no real home. And it could also serve as a warning that they may find themselves homeless and unsettled as a result of the conflict with Iran. In the background, the sky is a very bright yellow, indicating the need for consciousness to turn the lights on. And there are some clouds on the very distant horizon. So this card, the Seven of Swords, has influence from that seven as well. The seven is considered to be a sacred number of movement, travel, and change of location. When it turns up in a tarot card, it usually indicates that we are at some kind of threshold and are confronting a boundary of some kind. Has the Iran-Israel conflict carried us across a threshold that violates a boundary that will define our lives going forward? So this card is known as the Lord of Futility. And keywords are borrowing, theft, betrayal, trickery, evasion, hopelessness, sabotage, secret affair, snake in the grass, divorce, wavering, unstable effort, and giving up. So let's go on to question number 2. Given the situation at the southern border of the U.S. and the infiltration of tens of thousands of illegal immigrants, will this affect our ability to travel safely and to move about freely in our cities and towns? And the card drawn here was the Hermit, number 9 in the major arcana, a very unusual response to this kind of question. The Hermit symbolizes withdrawal from society, usually to locations that are either remote or secure and away from the madding crowd. The card does not point to danger in travel or moving about in order to get groceries or run errands, but it definitely indicates a consciousness that does not want any hassles with society and thus withdraws to seek other means of fulfillment. When we look at the card, we see a lone, bearded figure filling the card from top to bottom, indicating that this is a big issue that fills our lives and our minds. The Hermit is wearing a gray hooded robe, is carrying a yellow stave, and is holding a lantern with a bright yellow Star of David in it. He's standing in the snow on the top of a mountain, and the sky is an unusual greenish gray all around. The Hermit appears to be looking both inward and outward at the same time. It's almost as if he's reflecting inwardly while looking down the mountain at the world in some distant valley below. This inward-outward gaze symbolizes the need to be present to the self, as well as present to what's unfolding in the world around us. His white beard symbolizes wisdom, experience, and new beginnings, starting to behave differently or act in new ways. And his gray robe indicates that he has no need to be flamboyant or keep up with the styles and the fashions of the outer world. So does this tell us that we're coming to a time when we will withdraw from whatever is considered fashionable and up to date? Does it point to the possibility that we will withdraw from the world we grew up in to build the world we want? The lantern he is holding symbolizes holding the light, but it also represents the night watchman, who represents vigilance in the dark hours and the need to be aware. That's the watchman, vigilance in the dark hours and the need to be aware. The lantern also symbolizes the willingness and the ability to hold the light for others who are trying to make their way quietly to the top of the mountain, meaning they are working to overcome obstacles, old ideas, challenges, and difficulties associated with society in current times. The Star of David inside the lantern symbolizes the coming together of understanding and right action. And the yellow stave symbolizes not only seeing the light, but standing with the light, being supported by the light, and strength, the need for strength. So the snow, he's standing in the snow, and that symbolizes all kinds of challenges having to do with having forgotten parts of the self or having abandoned parts of the self long ago. It also can indicate the need to let go of some of yourself and start over, build a new self. So snow symbolizes virgin territory or lack of experience and new beginnings. Backing up the new beginnings symbolized by that white beard. The green-gray sky all around symbolizes withdrawal from outer distractions and the need to concentrate on what is essential and important in life. Not only does this card signal that it's time to withdraw, it tells us that there will be a need to stay calm while throwing off unimportant ballast, useless information, and to focus on staying safe, alert, and alive. Pretty direct there. The Hermit is the card of the need for prudent assessment and the wise use of time. When it appears in a reading, it suggests that we remove ourselves from society, put our lives in order, and see things from a better perspective that is powerful and clear while staying focused on the essentials. Clarity and staying focused on the essentials. The Hermit is related to Virgo, the astrological sign that demands common sense and reassures a capacity to give birth to new physical and spiritual forms in places that we were not originally familiar with. It demands that unfinished business be dealt with and new leaders be found with whom we can be in harmony and keep our integrity. So keywords for the Hermit are prudence, circumspection, treason, rogue attitude, countering corruption, concealment, disguise, policy, fear, caution, and temporary withdrawal. It pretty directly says a lot about our question. So question number 3, what do we need to know and do about the World Health Organization and the medical sovereignty the U.S. government is planning to hand over on May 8th, 2024? And the card drawn here was the 10 of Swords, a card that starts right out with a warning against giving up something critical. Might that critical thing we are giving up be sovereignty over our health and our bodies? In a way, the swords are always representative of the destructive mind and alienation from nature, especially our human nature. So in the light of our question, the 10 of Swords warns that this alienation will become a sacrifice that ends in destruction. And we will be down and out for the count, having lost something that will be difficult to regain and may not ever be regained. When we look at the Ten of Swords, we see a figure lying face down with 10 swords piercing him and nailing him to the ground on the shore of a river, the river of life. A red cloth is draped over him, and he's got his right hand kind of at a weird angle, and it looks like that right hand is in the shape of a blessing. The sky is black above with a bit of yellow on the distant horizon, where we also see a line of blue mountains. There are so many warnings associated with this card that it's hard to know which one to talk about. There are some gifts as well, but those gifts only come after facing and dealing with the situation this card represents. The basic message of the Ten of Swords is that we will be forced to give up or go beyond the idols, the models, and the misplaced fawning over false gods. Shall I read that again? We will be forced to give up or go beyond the idols, IDOLS, the models. People have all kinds of models of reality and how things are going to work out, and the fawning over false gods. Might those false gods be the authorities we have placed on pedestals? Might they be the institutions that we once thought were there to help us? Might they be the false gods, or might those false gods be the doctors, the scientists, and the government representatives we have empowered and listened to so dutifully for so many decades? A famous saying associated with this card is, if you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him. So why? What does that mean? It means that nothing from the past can fully prepare us for what is to come. All of the things that we hung on to, all of the idols that we believed in, and the helpers and the spirits and the guides, nothing will be what we need as we face what's coming. So we have to let go of old habits and old ideas. Something new is afoot, but we are not to draw conclusions too quickly. Step back, take a deep breath or two or three, and watch and listen and let yourself see what is happening and what is needed. The negative side of this card deals with hanging on to previous judgments and illusions that walk us right into disaster. The positive side of this card, it does have a positive side, pushes us to recognize that doing what we have always done will not get us any further or closer to the needed resolution of the massive tensions and problems we face. The black sky symbolizes that a thunderstorm is brewing, and the result of this storm will be a change of perspective, complete change of consciousness. This card also symbolizes having reached the peak of our tolerance, the peak of allegiance to the old, and the limits to our patience in waiting for right action from the authorities to whom we gave our power. The Ten of Swords indicates a process known as the dark night of the soul and coming to a conclusion. The dark night of the soul is coming to a conclusion and taking action that will remedy the situation. It's a card of transformation that begins in consciousness and ends up drawing all new conclusions that effectively end the old ways and the old world. Since our question is about who will have medical sovereignty and the right to dictate what will happen to our bodies, this card indicates that this is the issue that will tip the balance and awaken consciousness very broadly. There's little difference between pointing a gun and shooting bullets at bodies and pointing a needle and injecting destruction into bodies. This is what people will begin to realize. And this card says that this will be what finally awakens humanity to their predicament. The red robe draped across the body symbolizes the lifeblood of each of us and the need to allow that life and that blood to flow from generation to generation. Are we looking at what is happening to the younger generations and assessing what kinds of messages and conditioning they are being subjected to? The hand in the sign of the blessing hints that this issue of medical sovereignty, if handled with awareness that gets beyond the labels of theory and conspiracy, will be a tremendous blessing, although we may not realize this at first. This card is known as the Lord of Ruin, and the number 10 itself symbolizes being at the end of the line, such that, quote, the only options remaining are transition and a new beginning that often brings pain, tears, sadness, and destruction or desolation. Keywords for the 10 of Swords are closure, ruined plans, hitting bottom, undesired ending, tears, regret, setbacks, blocked communication, darkness before dawn, divorce from reality, logic of insanity, and dominion. So the last question, question number 4, was what can Mother Nature and the animal kingdom tell us about building a new world? I was kind of fishing here for something hopeful. So I was going to draw a card, but instead I went to Animal Speak by Ted Andrews and opened right to the section on birds where my eyes landed on the goldfinch. So the goldfinch carries a wonderful message that recognizes and supports the huge variety of ideas, lifestyles, and power of everyone. This little bird says that there will be a big increase in opportunities and options for new behavior, and that everything is going to be amplified. So things are going to get maybe a little more stressful, a little louder, a little more pressured, and a little more clear about what we need to do. The finch itself represents an ability to interact with a wide variety of environments and people. And this suggests both an increase in communication across regions and borders, as well as a curiosity and a comfortableness with differing cultures and lifestyles, something we may want to experience as we set about building a new world. Finches have an extraordinary ability to create new forms of song that attract good partners. And whenever any kind of finch shows up, it indicates that life is going to become much more active and require more work from us. The goldfinch itself symbolizes an awakening to beings and forms of intelligence from other dimensions of life, especially those that exist in the border areas of our reality zone. This border area, which I call the hybrid frequency zones, indicates or includes elves, fairies, and many ETs. In fact, the goldfinch is known for building its nests in habitats known as the tween places, where there are natural doorways to other realms of life. The favorite nesting material of the goldfinch is thistledown, and thistledown affords a great amount of endurance and persistence. Goldfinches sing almost constantly and are usually permanent inhabitants of a region. They change color and they get much quieter in the winter, but in the summer, they are brightly colored with a golden cap on their heads, and they're highly active, especially around the June solstice. The goldfinch represents our ability to communicate with nature and to move into other dimensions of existence without letting go completely of the outer realms we are so familiar with. In summing up, the message from Goldfinch is to celebrate the unique differences between and among ourselves, get active, and explore the tween places where other forms and ways of life are possible. So that's it for our 4 questions. So let's sum up here. Question 1 was, what should we know about the Israel-Iran clash in the Middle East and its outcome? And there were 2 cards drawn in one pull here, the Ace of Swords and the 7 of Swords. The Ace of Swords symbolizes a situation that could be quickly settled if the mind and the intellect were used appropriately. The Ace is a powerful card that holds an absolute belief in itself. It symbolizes that the power to create reality rests in our hands. And it urges us to awaken to any conflict, and it urges us to awaken to where any conflict is leading. The 7 of Swords came out when I pulled the Ace, and it represents theft, betrayal, and futile efforts. It represents a situation that is loaded with doubt and unrealistic expectations, and it warns against self-sabotage. Together, the 2 cards call for clarity of mind and a realistic assessment of what is driving this conflict and how to resolve it. Question number 2 was, given the situation at the southern border of the U.S. and the infiltration of tens of thousands of illegal immigrants, will this affect our ability to travel safely and to move freely about in our cities and towns? And the card drawn here was the very enigmatic card of the Hermit, number 9 in the major arcana, indicating that this is a major issue. The Hermit represents withdrawal from society because it is prudent to do so. Since our question is about travel and safety in moving around our cities and towns, this card says that it would be wise to develop alternate sources for the essential things of life. Things like community, water, food, clothing, heat, electricity, etc. This card is about common sense. It's about attending to details and organizing life around the essentials. It urges us to settle unfinished business so that we're free to create something else in new and unfamiliar places with leaders that maintain harmony and integrity. It's a tall order there. And question number 3, what do we need to know and do about the World Health Organization and the medical sovereignty the U.S. government is planning to hand over on May 8th of 2024. And the card here was the Ten of Swords, a dramatic card carrying many, many warnings. This is the card of being pushed to let go of everything we once thought or believed in. It also tells us that nothing from the past will help us deal with what is to come. We will have to step out of those boxes we have built for ourselves. The Ten of Swords says that we've reached the limit of patience, of allegiance to the old, and of willingness to wait for the authorities to fix things. The swords have nailed us to the spot we are in. And it's up to us to awaken to what will likely be a disaster and do something different. Although this sounds dire, the card promises a hidden blessing if we will face the massive tensions and deal with the situation. And then finally, question number 4, what can Mother Nature and the animal kingdom tell us about building a new world? For this question, I went to the book Animal Speak by Ted Andrews and opened right to the goldfinch, a little bird with a wonderful message. The goldfinch gives us a heads up that everything is going to be amplified, which indicates more noise, more pressure, more activity going on. However, it emphasizes that our differences are our strength, and our flexibility allows us to deal with a wide range of environments. That said, the great gift of the goldfinch is its ability to inhabit the edges, the borderlands, the tween places. So while this is an intriguing invitation to explore the borderlands of reality, consciousness, and connect with other forms of life, it also says that we can inhabit the space and time between the old world that has come apart and the new world that hasn't yet been built. In other words, we can and will be okay as things change. So that's it for the month of May. I hope you'll have some time to plant a few flowers, at least a few, while you keep your own transformation of ideas, thoughts, and juggling of priorities moving ahead. There are lots of us who are preparing or ready and waiting for things to settle in a new way, so you're not alone at all. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you in the month of June, or maybe some of you in the Intuition 2 class this coming weekend, May 3rd through 5th. If you haven't signed up, it's not too late. Go to my website, pennykelly.com, sign up, and have a wonderful, wonderful month.